Matthew 20, let's open verse 17. We are entering into a portion of study from here to the end of the book of Matthew, especially through at least verse 24. Chapter 24 is very anxious for me. It's anxiety, because we're going to be getting into the crucifixion of Jesus and what he went through and what it really means. That as a general rule in times past, as we talk to people and maybe even our own thoughts as we talk about crucifixion, it's just kind of a passing thing. You know, it's kind of like when we say, well, I believe in Jesus. Well, everybody believes in Jesus. But what do you believe about Jesus? And it's the same way with the crucifixion. You know, we talk about the crucifixion. And so he was crucified on the cross. But what do you know about the crucifixion? So Jesus here, beginning in verse 17 of chapter 20, is going to introduce his disciples to this thought and try to impart some knowledge to them, if you will, so that they can understand what's coming. And we'll see verses 17 and 18 of this chapter, and even 19, that their understanding was limited. And Luke even records that in Luke the 18th chapter and verse 44. He said they just didn't understand these things. 18 verse 34. Yeah, I think it's 44. Anyway, beginning in verse 17. Now, the parable of the hired laborers was our last study, and the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. And I thought about that during John's lesson Wednesday night. You know, talking about Jacob, Esau, Isaac, Ishmael. The last will be first, and the first will be last. You know, so when Jacob was born, when Esau was born, Jacob was holding his heel as they were being born, they were being twins. And I thought to myself, that fit pretty good. And how prophetic it is, how God proclaims the end at the beginning. And he has done this throughout, beginning in Genesis, all the way through Revelation. It's so important for us to remember that, because he declares the end at the beginning. So we're seeing some of the end that was declared at the beginning. And he says in verse 17, Jesus going up to Jerusalem. Now the multitudes have been following him because he's been doing some healing and some miracles. But they went up to Jerusalem, and he took the 12 disciples aside or apart in the way and said to them, verse 18, Behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man shall be betrayed unto the chief priests and unto the scribes, and they shall condemn him to death, and shall deliver him to the Gentiles, to mock, and to scourge, and to crucify him, and the third day he shall rise again. So, excuse me, please, let's stop right there and make a few comments along the way before we get too deep. He says to them, as he took them aside, this word, behold, said, pay attention, listen. I want you to really focus on what I'm about to say to you. And it's kind of like when Peter said, when Jesus had introduced the idea that he was going to be crucified, Peter said, no, not so. He said, even if I have to die, this shouldn't be. And Jesus said, get behind me. You are an offense to me. You're a stumbler. And my point being, Peter didn't quite understand or grasp what Jesus was saying to him. And when he told him, you're going to deny me 3 times. And I'm quite sure that Peter's mind said, no way. That's just not going to happen. And so it is today, we see a lot of people, just no way could I ever turn away from the Lord. But there is a way, brethren. There is a way, because it happens. You can fall from grace. People can fall from grace. And it's an astonishment to me how they can do so. But it happens. And so it is here. It says, listen, I want you to listen to me. Behold, we're going to Jerusalem. Well, what's at Jerusalem? This is the Passover. This is what's going to happen at Jerusalem. They're going up to Jerusalem. They're going to prepare for the Passover. And he said, now at Passover, he said, we're going up to Jerusalem. The Son of Man shall be betrayed. Really? By who? Who is going to betray him? And upon this betrayal, he's going to be betrayed to the chief priest and to the scribes. Notice this is his own people. Chief priests and scribes. And they shall condemn him to death. So his own people, upon this betrayal, are going to take him and under this disguise of, I don't know how you say it. It's not that, I don't know that Judas thought he was doing the right thing or doing some kind of good, or he was just rotten to the core. My feeling about Judas all along these years has been he's rotten to the core. So, but anyway, he betrays Jesus, and the scribes and the priests, they're going to take him, and they're going to, for no reason, no charges, no substantial charges whatsoever, his sentence is going to be death. And Jesus is telling them this: I'm going to be tried unjustly. I'm going to be condemned by my own people. You recall what Jesus said, that a man's enemies are those of his own household, of his own blood, of his own people. And so it is, you make that application. That's true even today. We take the household of God, and sometimes, many times, the man's enemies are those of his own household, of the household of God, of his own household of blood, so he said, my own people are going to betray me, and my sentence is death. And then, after they give me the sentence of death, now he died for all mankind, but listen what's going to happen. They're going to give him to the Gentiles. You see, now it wasn't lawful for them to, under Roman rule, to take and execute someone just arbitrarily. But howbeit they did. They did Acts 7 when they stoned Stephen. They just took it on themselves, when he said he beheld the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of God, and they just gnashed on him with their teeth, and they stoned him to death. But being not lawful, the Jews bore the guilt of condemning him to death, and the Gentiles were the ones who were going to crucify him. They delivered him to the Gentiles to do what? To mock him, to scourge him, and to crucify him. Now those three things, just the mocking, plucking of the hair, slapping him on the head with the crown of thorn, spitting on him, slapping him in the face, just humiliating him and degrading him to the best of their ability. Brother Paul?
Well, just to clarify one other thing there, of course the Jews is the one that got him arrested and tried and got him sentenced to death. They handed him over to the Gentiles, where they scourged him, and like you said, spit all kind of awful things to him. But it was the Roman soldiers that actually carried out the crucifixion.
Right.
Oh yeah, they didn't want to carry it out to death penalty.
Right. The Jews said, when Pilate came out there and he said he was going to wash his hands of Jesus, I'm innocent of the blood of this man, and no, you're not either. And he said, which one do you want me to deliver to you, Barabbas or Jesus? And they hollered Barabbas. And they said, they said about Jesus, crucify him, let his blood be on our heads and our children's heads. And in other words, they'll take the blame for it. And which they did, and they still bore that blame even today, I suppose. as all mankind, it's representative, you know, of mankind. But as Paul pointed out, the Gentiles, he was handed over to the Gentiles because the Jews didn't want to, they're playing politics here. They don't want to be seen as trying to usurp authority over the Roman government. So to do their dirty work, they hand him over to the Gentiles. And they mocked him, they pulled his robe off of him after he was scourged. And this scourging is something that was, over the years, I've heard several different, opinions. Let me just say it that way. But anyway, what the scourging was, I always thought it was a cat of nine tails, if you will. It's what we call it. It was a whip that was flayed at the end, and on the end of this whip, in each one of these separate pieces of leather, was little chips of bone that was sewn into it. But it's even more than that. It was little pieces of metal that was sewn into the end of it, that as they hit him, and they would pull it, this metal, and even the bones would do the same thing, would dig into the flesh. It's not just a superficial cut, brethren. This was something that was cutting deep into the flesh of his back. And it was designed to incapacitate him to the point that he could no longer physically function. He would bleed and bleed out profusely. And it was just an excruciating thing. Not to mention, after all this, after the humiliation, after the mocking, after the scourging he endured, he had to carry the cross. He had to carry his own cross, his own burden. And I'm reminded of John's lesson about Abraham and Isaac. Who carried the wood up to the mountain? It was Isaac. For what? See, it was symbolic of Christ carrying the cross, carrying our burdens, our burdens. And so he would be crucified on that cross. And his crucifixion is something else that was just horrible in and of itself. It was a perfected method of execution, perfected by the Romans. Most of like the two thieves on the cross, they wasn't nailed to the cross. They were tied. Their hands were tied. Their feet were tied. But Jesus was nailed to the cross. He was nailed to the cross. Nails in his wrists, in his palms, his hands, and his feet, driven into this wood. And you could just, can you not hear it? Close your mind, close your eyes, and look into your mind's eye as Jesus is there, and they lay this cross down, and they put him on it like this, and can you hear him scream? Can you hear him scream with utter pain and agony as these nails pierced his hands and his feet? Literally.
You know, when Judas hanged himself, but you got when Stephen was beat to death, basically, and all the apostles suffered very disturbing ways of death. The reason they had Jesus and the reason that they really went to the Romans is they wanted to shame him, discredit him, and let anybody know that you follow this man because he was the source. If we can destroy the source, we can stop this whole movement. And they couldn't do it.
Yeah, their whole idea was, okay, he said that he was king. Okay, we have taken the king of the Jews. Okay, that's what they call it, king of the Jews. And we have humiliated the king. We have degraded the king. Can't do that to any other king, not without a fight. Well, why didn't he fight? Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, you couldn't do these things. He even told Pilate, when Pilate said to him, don't you realize that I have power of life and death over you? Don't you understand that? What did Jesus say to him?
You have no power at all unless
He said, you wouldn't have this power if it hadn't been given to you from above. I know that probably didn't sit well with Pilate, He said, what? You would not have any power save it was not given to you from above. And so, Jesus sets things in right perspective. But they crucified him. They murdered him. And I'm reminded when I read this, just these 3 verses here, as Jesus went into the Garden of Gethsemane to pray, what did he say? He said, Father, if it be thy will, let this cup pass from me. It's important we understand this idea of cup. That's something he's going to partake of. If it be thy will, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will be done, but thy will be done. That's what we're seeing here. Jesus intended to do the will of the Father regardless. And if Scripture cannot be broken, then this is the way it's going to happen.
Is that seeing 2 parts of Jesus, seeing the physical side and the spiritual side? If this cup could pass from me, that'd be the physical side, but yet I'm going to do what you said.
And that's a good point. Because everybody, when they talk about Jesus, they look at Jesus as completely divine and only divine. Well, he was divine. He is divine. He is deity. He is God. But he's also human. That's why he's called the Son of Man and the Son of God. He's the Son of Man because he's born of a woman. He's the Son of God because he was conceived of God. He was conceived by God through the Holy Spirit to be born of a woman so that he could experience, as we read in the Hebrew letter, he was tempted in all points like as we, but yet without sin. Do you understand what that means? That he was tempted in all points like as we? Let's consider all points that we're tempted in. Have you ever considered that? He's a man. And as Leonard pointed out, he's showing both sides here. He went to the garden and he prayed. Father, is there another way? Is there something? If it be your will, can this cup pass from me? And the answer, of course, was no, because he goes on to say, nevertheless, not my will be done, but thy will be done. And we read in 1 Samuel 15:22 that it's better to obey than to sacrifice. It's better to be obedient to the Lord in all things than to sacrifice something to the Lord, presumptuously thinking that the Lord is going to be okay with it. He's going to be okay. And he's not, brethren. He's not going to be okay with presumptuous sin, with presumptuous sacrifices, when he sees the lack of obedience amongst his children. This is what happened when Moses came down from the mountain. He said, what do I hear? There's a noise in the camp. And it was said to him, well, it's a noise of jubilation. It's a noise of, happiness. No, that's not the noise. No. There's sin in the camp. There's sin in the camp. Brother, if we don't look around today and look at the church, that's what he's going to die for and purchase with his own blood, and we don't see sin in the camp, we can't recognize, and a lot of times we can't because our eyes have been glassed over. 2 Corinthians 4, verse 3 and 4. The God of this world has blinded our eyes. We're going to get into that in just a few moments. But we can't see the light of the glorious gospel. But we want to go out and we want to proselyte people. We want to teach people the truth. I was talking to a brother in Christ from South Austin just recently. He said, you know what, Larry? People don't know the truth. They don't know the truth. And he said, if you don't know the truth, what is it that you can't do with the truth? You can't teach it. You can't teach it. You can't even live it if you don't know it. And I thought it was an excellent point, and this is, if we don't look and see their sin in the account, then the crucifixion that we're about to read about later on means nothing. It holds no sway over us. We don't it doesn't ever enter our minds about the crucifixion. How that when he was nailed to the cross, and I tried to be, sometime back when I was preaching, that I tried to make a point of this by, as I was standing up on behind the pulpit, that when he was nailed to the cross, okay, he's down, they had ropes tied to each side, that's what the ring was for, and they lifted him up, and it's got a hole in the ground here, and it's probably 3 foot deep. And Christ is on this cross. As they pulled him up, and this cross rather, slipped into that hole, it made a resounding thud. And Christ's body just jerked on them nails. I tried to, I guess it's sensationalism or whatever you want to call it. But I wanted to impart to the brethren that was listening to me the seriousness, the gravity, the horrible nature of crucifixion. Here he was, barely alive, just barely alive, and he went through this. And he knows this. He's preparing his disciples for this. And then it's amazing as we read Luke 18:34, Luke says, and they understood none of these things. They understood. What does it take? What does it take for man to understand spiritual things? The Bible tells us, it says the spiritual man understands spiritual things, but the natural man understands not the things of the Spirit. Because he's carnal, he's natural. He doesn't think along those lines. And so they understood not. They were looking for the kingdom. The idea was introduced, in the parable of the laborers in the vineyard. How come they got paid more? We got paid less. No, you got paid the same. You got paid the same. Yeah, you worked longer, but what's your point? That's what you agreed to. That's what you signed up for. And let me get Leonard first. Go ahead.
When you think about what the Bible says, that righteous things and stuff, we should dwell on these things. What does that do? It drives evil out of your mind. That's what it does. And Jesus was the perfect example, because we wrestle with the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and the pride of life. We wrestle with that our whole time on this earth. And he mastered it. He mastered it. He did it.
He absolutely mastered it.
He's the perfect example.
Perfect example, exactly. Go ahead, Don.
Well, he's telling them things earlier that there's going to be a kingdom. He's telling them a spiritual thing. Mm-hmm. And they're carnal, so therefore they're having problems understanding it. Now here in this, he's telling them something that's carnal. And they already know there's going to be a kingdom, and he's going to be the king. But yet now he's telling them, physically, these things are going to happen to me.
Right.
And this is beyond their comprehension.
Yeah,
they just can't.
They can't process this.
Yeah.
And I'm not real sure that they grasp the spiritual side of it as well as we read in Acts first chapter. They said, will you restore the kingdom now unto Jerusalem? It was just, and to their defense, I suppose, mankind seems to be carnal not naturally. He seems to be, prior to obedience to the gospel, of a carnal mind. Okay? That's what is changing. That's what has to change. He has to think differently. He has to act differently. But sometimes you've been embedded with this stuff for many, many, many years, or it's been programmed into your mind. It's just tough sometimes to get these things out of your mind. And it's like Leonard said, the righteous dwell on these things. Once you make that commitment, that choice, then you begin to think along these lines. You begin to ponder the things that Jesus said. Because as I told that brother in South Austin, I said, it's an amazing thing. God has an incredibly good vocabulary. And guess what? He knows what words mean, and he knows how to use them. So, in his vocabulary, in his verbiage, as John would put it, in his wording, he put it all together here for us to find out and listen and understand. And then put it into action. You see, put it into our lives. The righteous do this. They think about these things all the time. Because in what he's telling these guys, his disciples, in these three passages here, he's telling them, first off, what's going to happen to him? His betrayal. It's nothing, it's a bad thing to be betrayed. But it's worse when your friends do it. It just puts another level of horror upon the betrayal and the disloyalty of friends. And I thought to myself, when I'm thinking of these things, okay, well, we sing a song sometimes, I'll be a friend of Jesus. Well, when did that happen? When did you decide to become a friend of Jesus? Jesus said, you are my friends, you are my disciples, you are my friends, if you do so whatsoever I command you. Well, when you did this is when you obeyed the gospel, when you made the commitment. Leonard?
The apostles, disciples are constantly asking Jesus all these things, and because they don't understand. Well, is Bible study supposed to be a science? No. You need to make it simple, because there are people in the crowd that don't understand some of the bigger verbiage and stuff. They just don't understand. It's like, you think about the parable of the sword. What they ask him to do? Say, hey, you need to explain this to you. You need to kind of, I hate to use the word dumb it down, but you got to get down here and let me understand it. So I'm not understanding this exactly. That's what the parables are about. That's how he used them. And that's how the people finally come to the understanding. And that's how Peter finally came to the understanding. There is no other way than you. There is no other way.
And it's incumbent upon us to understand, as the Ethiopian eunuch, he was searching, and he was asked a question, do you understand? And he responded, how can I, except some man guide me? So some man was Philip, and he joined himself to the chariot and began to explain. Philip knew the deeper things, the bigger picture, if you will, and he explained in the simple terms to the eunuch, and the eunuch come away with a simple answer: here's water, what I didn't mean to be baptized. And so I agree with Leonard, we have to sometimes, depending upon our audience and who we're talking to, sometimes people are educated beyond their own understanding. Sometimes you have to get up to their level. You have to step it up and speak on their terms so they can understand. And sometimes you got to bring it down. But it doesn't change the truth. Jesus is telling these folks here, I'm going to suffer, I'm going to die, I'm going to be crucified, I'm going to be mocked, and my friends is what's going to betray me. The disloyalty of my friends is going to be one of the sufferings that I go through. And the other is from the injustice. Another suffering that he'd go through is from the injustice. They hated me without a cause. For what reason did you hate this man called Jesus? What did he do, even from birth? They tried to kill him. Why did you hate him? Why do you hate someone? Paul even said that, have I become your enemy because I told you the truth? I shared the truth with you about any given subject. And that made you mad? That made you mad? My intention was not to make you mad. My intention was to enlighten you to the truth. That's what my intention was. And so, the injustice that Jesus is going to suffer. Why did you hate me? I come to die for you, but you hated me. The deliberate insults, and I thought about this, as he was hanging on the cross, they passed by and they just whacked their head, and they bite their lip and look up at him and said, if you you be the Christ, come on down from there, and then we'll believe you. No, you wouldn't. Before I got here, I was amongst you, raising the dead, healing the lepers, making the blind to see, causing the lame to walk, the deaf to hear. And you still didn't believe me. And you think you're going to believe me now if I just, I think I'll just get off this cross. No, you wasn't going to do that. You wasn't going to. The thing I'm pointing to is here, the deliberate insult. And they look at him and say, well, he saved himself, but he can't save others. Well, I thought about that for a moment. I said, that could rightly apply to us, couldn't it? We saved others. We can save others, but we can't even save ourselves. He saved others, but he can't save himself. I think I said that backwards. He saved others, but he can't save himself. There he is hanging on the cross. He can't even get off the cross. What kind of Savior is that? What kind of Messiah is that? What kind of power does he have? Look at him. He's bleeding. He's hanging on the cross. The insult. You see the insult? And then the physical pain, as we pointed to just a few moments ago, and the humiliation and the degradation that he went through. I'm going to try to find it real quick. I believe, let me turn over here to, I believe it's in the book of Psalms. It's in the 69th chapter, if my memory serves me. Bear with me just for a moment. Okay. We'll get to that in a minute. But he says now, as he prepared his disciples for all this is what's going to happen to me. And then, as we begin, continue on reading, we see now that John's mother, the mother of Zebedee's children, and her come with her sons, worshiping him and desiring a particular thing. Now, this next couple of verses here is apparent to me. They didn't get the message in chapter 8. They missed the memo. They just didn't get it, because he asked them for the same thing. He said, she asked for the same. He said, what would you have me to do? Verse 1. She says, grant that my two sons may sit, one on the right hand, the other on the left, in thy kingdom. And she just they didn't get it. They missed it. That's not what the kingdom is about. Who's the greatest? Who's the left? And who's sitting here? Who's sitting right there? That's not what it's about. He's going to make that point a little bit further on. But look, he says in verse 22, you don't know what you're asking. Are you able to drink of the cup? You see, now it goes back to taking, if it be thy will, let this cup that he's about to partake of. Jesus says here, are you able to drink of the cup that I shall drink of, and to be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with? And they say unto him, we are able. Kind of quickly answered. He says, are you able to go through what I'm fixing to go through? Are you? And then we get to Psalm 69, verse 15. He says in verse 15 of Psalm 69, well, let's begin in verse 14. Deliver me out of the mire, and let me not sink. Let me be delivered from them that hate me, and out of the deep waters. Let not the water flood overflow me. Let the deep swallow me up, and let not the pit shut her mouth upon me. He's referring to the death that he's fixing to die, and the baptism of which he's fixing to be baptized with, the cup which he's about to drink of. He says, he prophesied Psalm 69:15, don't let these things happen to me. He says, don't let the pit swallow me up and close her doors to me. And he asked the question, are you able to do this? Are you able to drink of the cup? Well, yeah, we sure are. Then he said, in verse 23, ye shall drink indeed of my cup, and be baptized with the baptism that I'm baptized with. But to sit on my right hand, on my left, is not mine to give, but be given to those, or to them for whom it is prepared of my Father. So he says, you will drink my cup. And we see this happening with Stephen, first martyr, then James, and then Peter, the rest of the apostles that were martyred or killed because of him, because of Christ, because of their belief, because of them following. John, he lived out a long life, and in the story, of course, he reported he was thrown into a pot of boiling oil and he survived. Well, that's just, I've checked into all that, done as many reference checks as I could, and there's just nothing there to hold that up. But the point being, he died an old man. He did indeed drink the cup in death, and he did indeed was baptized, or he was indeed baptized with the baptism that Christ was baptized with. He was persecuted. He was all of his life. And so he said, you're going to do this. You spoke presumptuously, you spoke hastily, but this is going to happen. You are going to do these things.
Actually,
and he says to them, further on in verse 23, but you asking me to take one and set it on my left hand, take the other son and set it on my right hand, and this is not mine to give, but it shall be given to them for whom it is prepared of my Father. And so they still had in their minds, who's going to sit on the 12 thrones? Who's going to be the greatest? And so Jesus said, that's not mine to give. That's not mine to give.
But he's got, and he gives them some information there prophetically, actually, that you're going to suffer. You have no idea what you're going to suffer.
Yeah, really.
He said, and then, so after the crucifixion and after his ascension and after he's risen, I think they're beginning to get the story and how this is going to play out. And I think everyone except for John died a very violent death. They gave, and that was what he had prophesied. It's going to happen.
And I missed one of my points I wanted to bring out about the resurrection, about him being crucified. But he said, and he shall, the Son of Man shall rise again. Well, we read in John the 10th chapter, verse 17 and 18, that Jesus had the power to lay down his life and to take it up again. So he's already set this in place. He knows what's going to happen. He's telling the disciples, I have the power to lay down my life, and I do it willingly. And I have the power to take it up again, and I do that willingly. I do that willingly to validate the resurrection is true. And they go to the tomb to find him. Well, why is he not there? Why is he not there? Not even the burial clothes are there. Just a napkin that's folded up at the head. Why is he not there? He's resurrected. Don't have to, and this is kind of a little rabbit touch of that. I read all the time. Well, the scientists have figured out that there's Saturn can support life. Really? You're not even concerned with life on Earth. But that's another thing, Go ahead, Linda.
The Jews thought that they had their sovereign way, but kind of find out it all crumbled right in front of them. And Jesus gave himself to be a sacrifice. They didn't take it.
That's right.
They had no power to take it. He gave himself.
Why didn't Jesus say anything before Pilate?
Got a good point.
Why didn't he say something? Why did he not defend himself? What's there to defend? He is the truth. He is the way. He is the life. He is the King, as he said. He is the Son of God, as he proclaimed. He is God, as he proclaimed. What is there to defend? What was it? You see, it's hard to defend. It's hard to defend when there's no basis for the accusation. Don?
Pilate is a political animal. Pilate's going to do what the politics calls for. The truth doesn't matter. So there's really nothing Jesus can say.
There's nothing he can say to change anything. They're not gonna change their mind. Go ahead, Brother John.
Well, and he didn't want to change their mind.
No.
Everything's going by providence of God. God's in control of the entire thing. So he has to have, there must be the sacrifice. So there is no defending this. I mean, if he defends it, then he wins. So I'm going to sit here and quiet and be like an animal that goes to a sacrifice and do this.
It's time. That's what it is. It's time.
It's time.
So I'm not gonna fight this. No, I shouldn't fight it.
Don't need to.
No.
Pilate already knows the injustice of it. Didn't change anything, did it?
Didn't change that. Verse 24, brother, next time, Lord willing.
Good stuff.